chosen one. You got them feeling dumb. Broken heart. They thought they buried your name deep enough that no one would ever speak it again, not in admiration, not in respect, not in reverence. They thought they'd written your ending and sealed it with confidence. 6 months ago, someone somewhere spoke words over your life like they carried divine authority. They sat in quiet corners and said, "They're finished. They're done." They spoke it with a smugness that came from thinking the power of their tongue was greater than the destiny written for you by the Creator Himself. They believed their voice could echo louder than your purpose. But what they didn't understand, what they never could, is that you don't get to bury someone whose roots are divine. Because when you're chosen, when your assignment carries weight in the spirit realm, you don't die in the dark. You transform in it. They thought the silence around your name was proof you were gone. But silence doesn't always mean absence. Sometimes silence means God is preparing the stage. And while they whispered, you waited. While they plotted, you prayed. While they doubted, you rebuilt, brick by sacred brick, with hands that had already known how to resurrect what others thought was dead. You see, they mistook your stillness for surrender. They mistook your distance for defeat. They thought the absence of noise meant the absence of power. But chosen ones don't announce their comeback, they embody it. There was a moment, 6 months back, when they gathered their circle, their little council of false confidence, and discussed your downfall like it was a done deal. They exchanged smiles over your supposed collapse. They spoke your name like a trophy they'd already claimed. They convinced themselves you had fallen off, that your light had dimmed, that the season of your relevance had ended. And they loved it. They relished the thought. They savored every word that confirmed their illusion of victory. Because it gave them something they'd been starving for. The illusion of superiority. But here's what's eating them alive right now. You're still standing. Still breathing. Still shining. Still blessed. And your existence, your presence, is now their discomfort. Your name, the one they tried to erase, is still echoing in rooms they never wanted to hear it in again. Your reputation, the one they tried to stain, is still spoken with respect by people who know who you are and what you carry. And that is what's driving them insane. Because when they buried your name, they forgot that seeds grow in dirt. They forgot that what they meant as burial, God meant as planting. They forgot that chosen ones don't disappear, they evolve. While they celebrated your ending, Heaven was authoring your new beginning. While they were mocking, you were metamorphosing. While they were gossiping, you were grounding yourself in peace. While they were throwing shade, you were photosynthesizing it into power. You see, what your enemies misunderstood is that you were never operating on their timeline. You were never competing in their race. You were never living to impress their limited perspectives. You were on divine time. You were on sacred frequency. And on divine frequency, delays aren't denials, they're recalibrations. What they thought was your defeat was your data collection. What they thought was your failure was your foundation. Because chosen ones don't crumble, they compose. They don't die in darkness, they develop in it. They don't fall apart, they reform into something stronger. 6 months ago, they thought they were watching the final act of your story. They thought the curtain had closed, the lights had dimmed, and your name would fade from memory like a forgotten melody. But instead of silence, a different sound began to rise, a frequency they couldn't identify. That was your comeback humming beneath the surface. That was your energy reconfiguring. That was your spirit reawakening. They just couldn't hear it, because they weren't tuned to your wavelength. Now, fast forward to today. They're confused, bothered, triggered, because they can't figure out how someone they thought was done is still moving, still creating, still smiling, still walking with peace like a crown. They don't understand how the same person they tried to humiliate is now more centered, more grounded, more radiant than ever before. Because they underestimated the power of alignment. They underestimated what happens when a chosen one learns that being misunderstood is part of the mission. They underestimated what happens when you stop needing validation from those who were never meant to understand your assignment. You see, they spoke words over you without understanding that their voice had no jurisdiction in your destiny. They tried to rewrite your narrative, but they didn't have publishing rights to your purpose. They thought they held the pen, but the ink of your story flows from divine authorship, and no human hand can edit what heaven has already approved. That's why, even after everything they said, even after every attempt to discredit you, even after every whisper that tried to reshape how others saw you, your truth still stands taller than their fiction. That's why people still remember your integrity. That's why your presence still commands respect without effort. That's why your light still breaks through even the thickest clouds of slander. Because authenticity doesn't need to compete. It simply exists, and everything false eventually crumbles beneath its weight. They can't explain it. They look at you and wonder, how are they still rising? They scroll past your name and feel that sting of regret. They hear your laughter, and it sounds like defiance to their ego. They see your peace, and it mocks the chaos inside them. Because the very thing they tried to destroy became the mirror that exposes what they lack. Chosen one, listen. You didn't just survive the attack. You outlived their narrative. You outgrew the environment that tried to suffocate your spirit. You detached from systems designed to control you. You walked away from energies that drained you. And in doing so, you rose to a level they can't access. They're stuck replaying the past because that's the only place they can still control the story. But you? You're living proof that divine favor has no expiration date. They wanted to see you beg, crawl, lose composure, but instead you embodied peace. They wanted a scandal. You gave them silence. They wanted drama. You gave them discipline. They wanted chaos. You gave them calm. And that contrast? That's what's tormenting them now. Because when you walk with grace after warfare, your peace becomes their punishment. Your progress becomes their panic. Your stability becomes their shame. Your glow becomes their guilt. You're not supposed to be here. Not according to their plan. They swore you were done. They swore they had proof. They swore they had power. But power borrowed from ego can't compete with purpose rooted in truth. When they said your name 6 months ago, they said it with laughter. When they say your name now, they say it with tension. Because something in them knows, they miscalculated. They bet against you. And lost. They prophesied your downfall, and became the prophecy of their own exposure. And that's the divine irony of being chosen. Your enemies always become the evidence of your anointing. So now, your name is doing what they never expected, it's growing louder again. Not through gossip, but through glory. Not through chaos, but through consistency. Not through clout, but through character. Because your endurance became your message. Your silence became your sermon. Your resilience became your revelation. You didn't need to prove anything. Your survival did that for you. And now, they're watching. From a distance. From fake pages. From silent envy. From the same shadows they hid in when they whispered about you. But this time, the light they mocked is too bright for them to deny. They're realizing you weren't just resilient, you were reborn. The person they buried isn't the one who rose. You came back sharper, wiser, purer. You came back with peace that can't be faked and strength that can't be shaken. And that terrifies them. Because they didn't destroy you, they defined you. They revealed who you were when everything false fell away. So hear me clearly. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're not forgotten. You're right on time. Everything that left was meant to. Everyone that betrayed you was required to. Every silence you endured was orchestrated for your preparation. Because chosen ones are not called to convenience, they're called to correction, transformation, and revelation. And your revelation is now unfolding before their very eyes. The same mouths that mocked you will soon have to mention you with respect again. The same rooms that excluded you will eventually request your presence. The same people who doubted you will one day have to admit they were wrong. Not because you need the validation, but because divine justice always finishes what ego starts. So stand tall. Lift your chin. Breathe deep. You're not just surviving, you're symbolizing what divine resilience looks like in human form. You are proof that darkness can't cancel light. You are evidence that favor cannot be faked. You are walking confirmation that being buried doesn't mean it's over. It means it's beginning, because the chosen are never finished, they are forged. And the fire that was meant to destroy you is now the same fire that purifies your name, restores your respect, and lights your path toward destiny. So let them talk. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. You don't owe them clarity. You don't owe them closure. You owe yourself continuation. Because your story isn't over. It's unfolding. It's becoming legend. And somewhere, right now, the same people who said, "You're finished," are realizing they were never the ones with the final word. Because you're still standing. It's unfolding. It's becoming legend. And somewhere, right now, the same people who said, "You're finished," are realizing they were never the ones with the final word. Because you're still standing. And your name still outshines. They gathered their circle. Quietly. Secretly. Like thieves of energy moving under the moonlight. They came together in rooms your spirit could feel even if your eyes could not see. Their laughter carried your name like a warning and a wish. A warning to others not to stand beside you, and a wish that somehow your light would dim enough to make them feel safe again. They spoke of you like you were a problem to be solved, not a person to be understood. They crafted stories with careful hands, dripping venom disguised as concern. They dressed their intentions in wisdom, pretending it was advice, pretending they were protecting others from you, when in truth, they were protecting their own egos from being eclipsed by your growth. And oh, how they plotted! Not with swords or weapons, but with words. Whispers that traveled faster than arrows ever could. Sentences sharpened with envy, coated in false smiles. They gathered their counsel of the insecure and built altars out of gossip. They didn't pray for your downfall, they expected it. In their minds, they'd already watched you crumble. They'd rehearse your collapse like a scene in a play they wrote without your permission. Every lie they told was a line in their script, every smirk a prophecy they believed they were powerful enough to fulfill. They thought humiliation would silence you. They thought shame would chain you. They thought exposure, their version of it, would end you. But the truth is, nothing they buried was ever yours to keep buried. Because you were never built on their opinions. Your foundation wasn't in their validation. Your identity wasn't rooted in their recognition. They forgot that chosen ones are sustained by something the world can't manipulate: divine backing. You could feel it, couldn't you? The shift in energy before the betrayal showed itself in the physical. The coldness in voices that once carried warmth. The conversations that changed when you entered the room. The way laughter seemed to die the moment your spirit walked in. It wasn't your imagination. Your soul knew before your mind could name it. They were building walls while you were building bridges. They were counting your flaws while you were counting your blessings. They were studying your steps not to walk beside you, but to map your missteps. And even as you sensed it, you stayed kind. Because you loved with sincerity. You believed in people's potential. You saw their wounds and mistook them for innocence. You thought loyalty meant staying even when your intuition screamed, "Go." But they took that loyalty and fed it to their fear. They mistook your patience for weakness. They misread your compassion as naivety. They didn't realize you were simply choosing peace over pettiness. And then the knife came, not in the back, but through the smile. Sweet words with sour intention. Compliments that tasted like honey but burned like acid when you swallowed them. You watched familiar faces become strangers, and strangers become critics. They tried to make you doubt yourself. That was the real goal. They wanted you confused, second-guessing, apologizing for existing. Because when you question your own worth, you do their work for them. When you shrink, they feel taller. When you dim, they feel brighter. And for a moment, you almost believed them. For a moment, their noise became your narration. You looked at your reflection and wondered if they were right. You replayed their accusations in your mind like a song you never wanted to hear, but couldn't turn off. That was their power, not the betrayal itself, but the infection of doubt that follows. They wanted to live rent-free in your thoughts. To make you mistrust your light. To make you question your calling. Because if they could break your spirit, they'd never have to face their own. But the chosen don't stay broken for long. Your fall wasn't a failure, it was a filter. It revealed what was false, and it refined what was real. You began to see everything clearly. The patterns. The players. The puppeteers who thought they were invisible. And when you finally stood in your truth, they called it arrogance. When you set boundaries, they called it betrayal. When you withdrew your energy, they called it changing. But you didn't change, you remembered. You remembered who you were before the noise, before the manipulation, before the need to prove your worth to anyone blind to it. You remembered that your power was never in their approval, it was in your alignment. And so you fell, but not like they hoped. Not a crash, but a descent into clarity. Not destruction, but detachment. Not ruin, but revelation. You fell into the truth of who you are, and that was the most dangerous thing you could have done. Because now, they can't control a version of you that no longer exists. They can't guilt a healed heart. They can't shame someone who already made peace with their scars. They can't confuse someone who learned to trust their intuition more than public opinion. The very fall they prayed for became your foundation. The ground they tried to pull from under you became the solid rock you built upon. You see, the betrayal didn't break you, it birthed you. It forced you to confront what you were protecting that never protected you back. It revealed who truly stood with you, and who was just standing near you to catch the glow. It showed you that some connections end not because of hate, but because of misalignment. Because your growth exposed their stagnation. They couldn't handle the mirror your evolution became. Every step you took toward authenticity reminded them of the masks they refused to remove. Every truth you spoke echoed through their lies. Every boundary you set shattered the illusion of their control. So they retaliated with whispers. They tried to rewrite history, to cast you as the villain in the story you authored with love. They told tales of your pride, your distance, your change. But what they called distance was discernment. What they called pride was peace. What they called change was growth they were never willing to do. And while they spun stories, you stayed silent. You didn't defend yourself. You didn't fight for a version of the truth that time would reveal on its own. You chose stillness. Because silence, when backed by truth, always speaks louder than noise fueled by insecurity. They wanted a reaction. You gave them revelation. They wanted drama. You gave them disappearance. They wanted chaos. You gave them calm. And that calm, that holy, unshakable calm, exposed everything. Because when a chosen one stops defending their name, heaven starts defending it for them. Doors began to open where they swore you'd never walk again. Opportunities started flowing in places they thought they'd closed off forever. People they tried to turn against you began to see through the fog. The truth began to whisper in every ear that once listened to their lies. And those who joined the betrayal out of convenience began to feel conviction. The same mouths that mocked you started questioning what really happened. The same hands that pointed at you began to tremble under the weight of guilt. Because divine order doesn't forget. It simply waits for the appointed time to reveal what was hidden. And that time has begun. They thought they'd buried your name in dirt. But the dirt became your soil. The whispers became your wind. The isolation became your incubation. They thought they'd stripped you of support, but they accidentally stripped you of distraction. They thought they'd silenced your voice, but they only cleared the noise around it. They thought they'd ended your story, but they only turned the page. You see, betrayal is never the ending, it's the editing. It cuts out what can't carry the next chapter. It exposes what doesn't deserve access to your peace. It redirects you to the divine blueprint they tried to erase. So yes, you fell, but you fell forward. Into purpose. Into power. Into alignment. You fell out of illusion and into illumination. You fell out of their circle and into your calling. You fell out of manipulation and into mastery. And though they celebrated your supposed collapse, the celebration was premature. Because every fall has an echo, and yours echoed with rebirth. They didn't know the seed must first go under to grow upward. They didn't realize the cocoon must close before wings can unfold. They didn't understand that endings aren't always exits. Sometimes they're entrances to elevation. Their illusion of control was buried with their plan. Because they never had control. They never had power over your destiny, only temporary access to your space. And when the divine said, "Enough," the curtain closed on their performance. Now, they watched from the shadows, confused, convicted, and quietly collapsing under the weight of their own deceit. They tried to bury you in lies, but forgot, truth breathes through soil. And every time someone tries to dig up the past to hurt you, all they find is proof that you grew roots deeper than their reach. So walk tall, chosen one. The betrayal wasn't your destruction, it was your direction. The fall wasn't your failure, it was your flight. And the pain wasn't punishment, it was purification. Because the only thing buried that day was their illusion of control. And the only thing that rose was you. They thought you'd never recover. They thought the ashes would swallow you whole. But the storm didn't break you, it revealed you. While they plotted your ending, the divine was already sketching the lines of your rebirth. Every word spoken against you became clay in the Creator's hands, shaped into lessons, strength, and vision. You stood inside the ruin they left behind and felt everything collapse, yet something ancient inside you whispered, "Not yet." The voice that knows eternity spoke quietly through the chaos, reminding you that endings are illusions for those who cannot perceive transformation. You listened, trembling, but you listened. And that listening changed everything. At first, it was just breath. You learned to breathe again without bitterness. You learned to wake up without replaying conversations, without carrying ghosts in your chest. Then came movement, the small decision to stand, to tidy what remained, to make peace with the silence that used to hurt. You didn't realize it, but in those small acts, resurrection had already begun. You started seeing signs, the kind that appear when the universe leans closer. Numbers repeating, dreams vivid, the sudden alignment of chance encounters. It wasn't coincidence, it was confirmation. The same energy that once felt like loss began rearranging itself into preparation. What was stripped away made room for what was real. Your tears became holy water. Every drop that fell watered something unseen, patience, empathy, wisdom. People mistook your quiet for defeat, but silence is where creation rehearses. While they talked, you transformed. While they bragged about burying you, you rooted deeper. They didn't know that soil and grave look the same until the sprout emerges. Then came light, first faint, then bold. You woke up one morning and noticed that the heaviness wasn't sitting on your chest anymore. The same mirror that once reflected pain now showed power. The eyes staring back at you had learned something they could never unlearn. That survival isn't luck, it's divine design. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped auditioning for spaces that required you to shrink. You realized that their rejection was direction, their doubt was disguise for divine redirection. And once that truth settled into your bones, peace replaced anger, purpose replaced confusion, and gratitude replaced grief. They thought they silenced you, but silence became your strategy. You learned that revenge is too small for someone with destiny. You began investing your energy in rebuilding, not proving. Because real proof doesn't need witnesses. It leaves evidence in the transformation itself. Your gifts returned sharper. Your discernment stronger. You could sense energy before words were spoken. You no longer chased clarity. It arrived to meet you, because your frequency finally matched your truth. And that truth was simple. You were never finished, only forged. Each day you rose a little higher, and each rise exposed something new. People began to notice the shift, the calm in your voice, the focus in your eyes, the way you carried light like armor. You didn't announce your comeback, your energy did. You didn't need validation, your existence was vindication. The universe began rearranging itself to mirror your alignment. Opportunities appeared out of nowhere, doors opened that had once been bolted shut. Connections formed not from desperation but resonance. The right people recognized you without explanation. They felt your frequency before they knew your name. And the ones who once plotted your downfall? They began to feel it, the unease that comes when lies lose power. They watched as the story they wrote about you unraveled in front of them. They heard your name again, this time spoken with respect, admiration, and curiosity. The same mouths that cursed you began whispering your resilience like a rumor of redemption. You learned to forgive, not because they deserved it, but because freedom demanded it. You realized forgiveness isn't weakness, it's a spiritual severance, the act of cutting energy cords that no longer serve evolution. When you forgave, you didn't excuse their actions, you reclaimed your power from their hands. Now, everything you lost has returned in divine order. Not the same forms, but better, purer, aligned. The turning point isn't a moment, it's a realization. You were never the victim of their story, you were the author of your own. And now, pen in hand, purpose in heart, light in eyes, you write again. This time, not to survive, but to soar. You began to notice how peace moves differently than pride. Peace doesn't argue. It doesn't chase. It doesn't shout to be seen. It just stands, radiant, steady, undeniable. And that's what you became, proof that stillness is not weakness, it's strategy. People who once doubted you started questioning their own discernment. The ones who believed the lies are realizing they never really knew you, and that realization burns. Because truth has a frequency that doesn't fade. It hums beneath every rumor until even the deaf can hear it. You became the hum. The undertone of authenticity. You didn't defend yourself, yet your actions became a defense stronger than any words could be. You didn't fight for reputation, you let revelation handle it. Because when God rewrites a narrative, even the ink of your enemies starts to fade. Every setback turned into sacred training. Every closed door taught you how to build your own. Every betrayal introduced you to boundaries. And every loss stripped you of what you thought you needed so you could discover what was essential all along. The divine wasn't punishing you, it was protecting you. It wasn't rejection, it was redirection. You were being moved out of alignment with imitation and into alignment with authenticity. And once you aligned with truth, every counterfeit connection collapsed under its own weight. They say pressure creates diamonds, but they forget that fire refines gold. You've been through both. And now you gleam. You carry the glow of someone who's seen darkness and chosen not to become it. You carry the grace of someone who has been humbled by heartbreak yet crowned by healing. You carry the authority of someone who learned the difference between ego and essence. The divine didn't just restore you, it upgraded you. Every scar became a signature of survival. Every wound became a window for light. Every time they said you were finished, heaven whispered, "Watch this." You began attracting differently. Not people who wanted your energy, but people who matched it. Not opportunities that drained you, but ones that expanded you. Not spaces where you had to prove your worth, but environments that already recognized it. You learned that protection sometimes looks like isolation. When the crowd disappeared, you thought you were forgotten. But solitude was where you met your spirit again. It was where you realized that divine favor doesn't always announce itself with applause. Sometimes it hides you until the stage is ready. And when it was ready, you didn't need to force your entrance. Your presence was invitation enough. The same people who tried to erase your name now see it written in places they can't reach. The same voices that whispered your downfall now echo your comeback story without even knowing it. Because truth doesn't need defenders, it needs time. And time has proven everything they said about you false. Now the same energy that tried to stop you has become the current pushing you forward. They wanted your ending. Instead, they sponsored your evolution. You see, the turning point wasn't when people started believing in you again. It was when you stopped needing them to. The moment you realized your worth was not up for debate, everything changed. The moment you stopped trying to explain your light to those committed to misunderstanding it, your soul exhaled for the first time in years. You stopped moving from survival and started moving from purpose. And purpose moves differently. It doesn't rush, it recognizes divine timing. It doesn't compete, it creates alignment. It doesn't beg, it builds. Now, the energy that once sought to destroy you kneels before your endurance. Every projection has been reversed. Every false story has been swallowed by truth. And those who doubted you are left facing a reality they can't deny. You rose, and nothing they did could stop it. There's a kind of silence that follows redemption, not the silence of fear, but of awe. They're quiet now. Not because they respect you, but because they can't explain you. You've become something unclassifiable, something that transcends every label they tried to force upon you. You are both the lesson and the proof. You are the embodiment of divine equilibrium, the point where pain becomes purpose, where endings become entrances, where humiliation becomes holiness. Now, when you look back, you don't see betrayal, you see blueprint. You don't see chaos, you see choreography. Every misstep, every heartbreak, every exile was a setup for alignment. What they meant for destruction became construction. You were being built for endurance. You were being sculpted for leadership. You were being shaped to carry something sacred. Something too powerful to exist in spaces that didn't honor your essence. That's why it had to happen the way it did. If they hadn't betrayed you, you would have stayed small. If they hadn't lied, you would have never learned the truth about yourself. If they hadn't walked away, you wouldn't have discovered your wings. So you thank them now, not out of sarcasm, but sovereignty. You thank them for pushing you into the arms of destiny. You thank them for forcing you to meet your higher self. You thank them for teaching you that closure isn't something they can give you. It's something you grant yourself when you choose peace over proof. The turning point isn't about getting revenge. It's about rising so high that revenge becomes irrelevant. Because true power doesn't announce its return, it arrives with quiet confidence. It doesn't shout, "I told you so." It simply shines. And your light, right now, is blinding. This is your transformation. Not the loud kind that demands attention, but the kind that shifts atmospheres. Not the shallow kind that performs healing, but the deep kind that radiates wholeness. You've become untouchable, not because you're invincible, but because your peace is protected by purpose itself. And now you move differently. You don't chase destiny, you magnetize it. You don't run from opposition, you understand that resistance is proof of movement. You don't fear the next storm, you welcome it, knowing you are built from thunder and prophecy. They thought you'd never recover. But the storm didn't break you, it revealed you. While they plotted your ending, The divine was scripting your rebirth. And now you stand not as who you were, but as who you were always meant to become. A walking revelation, a divine contradiction, a living testament that light cannot be buried. You are the turning point, not just in your story, but in every story that intertwines with yours. Because when a chosen one rises, the frequency of the entire world shifts. You've walked through the valley, and now the light finds you again. It doesn't rush in, it arrives like dawn, slow and certain, touching the edges of everything that once felt lost. You don't even notice at first. It begins as warmth on the skin, a quiet awareness that the night has finally released you. And then you realize, you're standing in a place you never thought you'd reach. The storm didn't end with noise, it faded into stillness. And in that stillness, something sacred began to breathe through you. The pain that used to weigh down your chest has transformed into clarity. The questions that once haunted you now sound like answers. You finally understand. Every fall was choreography, every silence a sacred pause. The divine was never late, it was patient. It let the noise die out so you could hear the whisper. It let the shadows lengthen so you could recognize your own glow. You were never abandoned, only refined. Now, when you move, the ground recognizes you. It steadies beneath your feet because you've earned your balance. Every scar on your soul has become a map, guiding you to higher places. And the air itself feels different, lighter, thinner, as though even the universe has begun to make room for you. You used to wonder why the fire came. Now you see it was never meant to destroy. It was meant to temper. You are steel now, gleaming with purpose, unbending in your truth. The world around you begins to echo the rhythm of your healing. You walk past the places that once broke you and feel nothing but gratitude. Not the soft kind, the fierce kind that comes from knowing you survived what was meant to silence you. You carry no bitterness, only wisdom. You hold no grudges, only grace. Because you've learned that revenge is too heavy to carry on wings built for flight. And the people who tried to bury you, you no longer need to name them. Their energy fades with every breath you take. You've realized the real victory isn't that they lost, it's that you refuse to become them. You refuse to mirror their malice, and that refusal became your crown. This is what rising looks like. Not fireworks. Not noise. Just quiet, undeniable expansion. Your aura stretching wider, your spirit standing taller. You're no longer trying to prove that you're chosen, you simply are. You move through life now with reverence. Every morning feels like scripture written just for you. Every step feels ordained. And when people ask how you did it, you smile, because words could never explain what grace performed in silence. You've begun to see the purpose of the pain. The way heartbreak opened your empathy. The way loss sharpened your discernment. The way betrayal stripped away illusions that could have cost you your destiny. It all connects now, every detour, every delay, every denial. The divine was never denying you. It was designing you. You had to be hidden so you could heal without distortion. You had to be misunderstood so you could learn not to depend on understanding. You had to be alone so you could meet the parts of yourself that only solitude introduces. And now that you've met them, the fierce, the gentle, the infinite within, you walk as wholeness incarnate. You carry yourself like someone who knows they were never forgotten, only being formed. The rise isn't loud. It's luminous. It's the quiet kind of glory that doesn't need a stage. It's the kind that hums beneath your skin when you wake, knowing you are exactly where you're meant to be. You start to notice that the world responds differently now. Doors open without you knocking. People approach you with respect they can't explain. Opportunities align like constellations. Everything that once felt far suddenly feels familiar, because it was always yours, waiting for your readiness. You are not chasing what's meant for you anymore. You're attracting it effortlessly, magnetically, divinely. And that's when it hits you, you've entered your era of ease. Not because life became simple, but because you became sovereign. You stopped fighting the current and started flowing with it. Your rise is not rebellion, it's remembrance. You are remembering who you were before they told you who you couldn't be. You are remembering that every loss was really love disguised as direction. You are remembering that power never left you. It was only waiting for your permission to return. And now it has. It floods your body like sunlight breaking through ancient windows. It fills your chest with peace too deep for language. You finally feel the balance. Not too much light, not too much dark, just the sacred middle where transformation lives. You breathe differently now. You speak differently. You love differently. Because you've seen the truth. Rising isn't climbing higher, it's sinking deeper into alignment. It's not about escaping the past, it's about alchemizing it into wisdom. You are not what happened to you. You are what was born from it. And what was born is unstoppable, unshakable, undeniably divine. You've crossed the wilderness, and now the horizon bows to you. Not because it must, but because it recognizes what you've become. You are not the same soul that stumbled in the storm. You are the one who learned to dance in the rain without demanding that it stop. Your strength no longer shouts, it radiates. Your light no longer competes, it simply is. You no longer chase validation, because truth stands taller than applause. You've discovered that peace is the loudest victory of all. When you look back now, you don't see enemies, you see teachers. You don't see betrayal, you see redirection. Every disappointment was a divine appointment in disguise. Every door that closed saved you from a room too small for your spirit. You used to pray for clarity, not realizing you were already walking inside the answer. Every sleepless night built resilience in your bones. Every tear watered your purpose. Every silence taught you to listen to the language of faith. You are fluent in surrender now. You know how to release what no longer serves you without bitterness. You've become a master of letting go gracefully. And that, chosen one, is the highest form of power, the ability to walk away with peace. People see your calm and think life became easier. But you know the truth, you just stopped negotiating your worth. You no longer beg for understanding from hearts not built to carry your frequency. You've accepted that some people were never meant to walk the full distance with you. They were lessons, not lifetimes. And that realization doesn't harden you, it softens you. Because now you understand, love doesn't always mean staying, sometimes it means releasing. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. It's you saying, I won't let your shadow dim my dawn. You've outgrown the noise of needing to prove yourself. You've outgrown performing for acceptance. You've outgrown chasing closure. Now your presence is your statement. Your silence, your sermon. Your peace, your revolution. The divine whispers through everything around you now. The wind carries affirmations. The sunlight feels like recognition. Even the quiet hum of ordinary days feels sacred. You are walking scripture, living testimony that resurrection is real, even for hearts still learning to trust again. Your glow confuses those who remember your breakdowns. They can't understand how someone so shattered could shine so effortlessly. But they don't realize, you stopped trying to fix the glass. You let the light shine through the cracks instead. That's what makes you different. That's what makes you divine. You no longer seek revenge, you seek revelation. You no longer need justice, you are justice, the kind only grace can deliver. The universe rearranged itself the moment you chose healing over hate. Because when a chosen one heals, entire timelines realign. You are not returning to who you were, you are arriving at who you've always been. There's a sacred difference. Returning looks backward, arriving looks within. And inside you, there's a kingdom, calm, vast, radiant. You now understand that the rise was never about the world seeing you. It was about you seeing yourself. Recognizing that you've been holy this whole time, even when broken. That your tears were not weakness, they were baptism. That your silence was not defeat, it was incubation. The divine didn't just lift you, it rebuilt you. Brick by brick, breath by breath. And now you walk with the kind of grace that can't be faked. You've become a mirror. Wherever you go, people are reminded of what's possible when faith refuses to die. You don't force doors anymore, you bless them, and the right ones open. You don't chase alignment, you embody it. You don't beg for signs, you become the sign. That's what true rising is, when heaven doesn't have to shout to find you anymore. You live lighter now, but deeper. You laugh softer, but truer. You love slower, but purer. You've learned that real peace doesn't come from what you hold, it comes from what you release. And now, the same voices that once doubted you fall silent in awe. Not because you've proven them wrong, but because you've transcended the need to prove anything at all. You're operating from a frequency beyond comparison. You've become the evidence that no amount of plotting can destroy divine purpose. You are not back, you are beyond. And everything you touch begins to glow with the memory of what it means to rise. Listen closely now, chosen one. The storm has passed, the silence has spoken, and you are standing in a place your enemies never imagined you'd reach. They thought your story would end in whispers, but it echoes in eternity. They thought your light would flicker, but you became the fire itself. They thought you'd crumble under the weight of their lies, but those lies became your ladder. Every word thrown to break you became a rung that lifted you higher. You stand now in the aftermath of what was meant to erase you, and you glow. Not the kind of glow that seeks attention, the kind that radiates peace. The kind that unsettles darkness simply by existing. Because your survival isn't loud. It's sacred. It's written in the way you walk, in the calm of your spirit, in the quiet assurance of your eyes. You've entered the phase of divine anonymity. You no longer announce every blessing, you embody them. You no longer explain your transformation, you live it. You've become fluent in stillness, and that scares people who only understand chaos. You remember when you begged God for justice, don't you? When you cried out asking why liars seemed to prosper, why the snakes moved unchecked. And now you understand, judgment was never delayed, it was unfolding in silence. Because sometimes the divine doesn't strike, it reveals. And revelation is the most merciful, most devastating form of justice there is. Look around you, you see the signs. People who twisted your name now carry the weight of their own deception. Their circles are shrinking. Their masks are slipping. They are discovering that you can't build stability on falsehoods. You can't manufacture power. You can't counterfeit peace. They are haunted not by your vengeance, but by your absence. They thought silence meant defeat. They never realized silence was strategy. You learned to fight battles by no longer participating in them. That's where your elevation began.